In this video, we'll be looking at JavaScript variables. We touched upon them briefly in the previous video on syntax, so let's go a bit more detail about them. So basically, treat a variable as a container, which we can store value to, and all programming languages have variables. The way we declare them in JavaScript is we use the var command. So if we look at an example inside W3 Schools, we've got an internal JavaScript example here. I'll just move this out of the way. And you can see here that I've declared three variables of 5 and 6, which are examples of what we call the integer type. Now remember, integers, which are numbers, whether it's decimal, which is a float, are always going to be in no quotes. So here we've got no quotes here. If it's a string, it's either in single or double quotes. So we can change these values here, like so, put bigger numbers in there. So the total should be now 20 if I run it. I can also change the arithmetic operator. So if we go to multiplication, which remember is the asterisk, and run it, then we have 100. So variables are really useful. You're going to be using them quite a bit, especially when you're working with forms and other advanced aspects of JavaScript. So if we go back here to our code, we've got the most basic variable there. You can also, I also recommend, as I said before, using more descriptive names. So here you've got price, 1, 2, and total. It just helps make more sense because you can see here that we've got two prices, and it's now easy to understand that the total is to add two prices together, where if you use X, Y, and Z, it doesn't really mean much in terms of identifying it. And this is what we call identifiers. So it's recommended that when you're naming your variables that you make them meaningful. You can use some letters, digits, underscores, and special characters such as dollar signs. They must start with a letter, so you can't start a variable name with a number, and you can't have spaces. So if you're going to use a space, you need to use an underscore. So when we assign a value to a variable, you must use the equals. So if we're going to assign x equals x plus 1, for example, here, you must use an equals. Can't use anything else. So no equals plus or whatever other languages use. You've got the two major data types. So variables can be defined as either being a string or a number. Okay, and a number can either be a decimal, which is what we call float in other languages, or it can be a whole number integer. And you can see here when we declare it, we're declaring pi, the short pi, two decimal places to be 31.4, or we can have what's called a string, and it can either be in single or double quotes. You can also declare multiple variables at the same time, in the same line. So basically you can declare for two or more variables. That saves on space. But it's up to you if you want to do that. And that's pretty much the basics of variables. So in summary, variables are used as a container for a particular value. So you might have a form, and on that form you might have a name and age. So you'd have a variable called name and age, and then you can then manipulate those values. We declare them with the var command, okay? And there's some rules around naming variables. You can't start with a number, must start with a letter. You can't use spaces. And if you're going to use a space, you must use an underscore. So if you want to have first name, for example, you can go first underscore name. And then also you can have two data types. So you've got the numbers, which are declared with basically no quotes around them. And you've got the strings, which have either a single or double quote. If you've got any more questions about variables, you can either let me know or you can look at future tutorials.